to be here. Thanks for inviting us along. So we just had a nice chat over lunch. So I was just trying to sense what you've been talking about this morning, really. And the sense that, am I allowed to speak? Okay. I just think there was a sense that what you were talking about this morning was quite emotional. And, you know, to a certain extent, that's exactly how I feel about what I do. And this week has been, well, the last 2 weeks, really, have been incredibly emotional. I'm sure you're all feeling it too, because if I'm feeling it, then you're feeling it. It's like, you know, there's been incredible highs and there's been incredible lows. And this has made incredible differences, I think, because I've never had as much adversity in doing this job. I've been doing this 11 years, this particular job. And when I first started, there was adversity to this work. And it seems to me just this week, I've had that same level of angst and adversity and fear around sexual orientation and gender identity, or just diversity as a whole, that has appeared this week. I've had like parents, you know, being very vocal and saying, this is wrong, the kids are too young, the only relationships that I think are valid is when daddy plants a seed into mummy. This is an actual thing that was said to me this week. And another head teacher that I had a meeting with this week just went, well, this might be kind of useful for our white middle class boys. I go, this is nothing to do with class, nothing to do with gender, nothing to do with culture. It's nothing to do. These are everybody's issues. The whole of equalities, like, you know, because I'm guessing you all work in equalities in some sort of another. So you're completely on board. I know I'm preaching to the converted today, but this is what we are up against every day, and I've been very sad about that. So it's been the high. I got awarded, bizarrely, in all this right-wing madness that we are surrounded by at the moment, I've got an MBE in the honours list last Saturday for my work.
Congratulations!
For like my work in diversity and equality. For equality and diversity, that's amazing, isn't it? In the culture that we are in right now. So I'm still in shock by that, but happy to take it. And then the same night, as you know, it was the Orlando shootings. That has been an awful impact on the LGBT community, as you can well imagine. I don't know if you watched the Panorama special. Did you watch that the other night? Right, it showed the whole thing in action, how it all started, went through it graphically. I thought, well, I've got to make myself watch this. I have to know how this happened. And the backlash from that was, again, it's Islamophobia. So that blame culture that we've got ourselves into, that, you know, let's pit one group against another and let's do that, that is happening more and more. And I'm really terrified. I'm really terrified. This is the rise of the right wing, and we're in a horrible climate. And for me, I've been trying to keep myself together every day and just try and counteract that, which is what I think is the right thing to do, which is treating everybody equally and fairly. Equally and... That's right, everyone, come on. I know, you've got to jump on the rainbow bus and let's do this together, because if we don't do it on the factory floor and our grassroots level, it's not going to happen. We have got to remember that we've got to drive this forward. We're working every day in this environment, and we have to keep this going. We cannot let our finger off the pulse of equalities for 1 single second. Otherwise those rights get taken away from us, and I can see very clearly that they might do at any given point. So more drive for us. Anyway, my career basically, I was a secondary school music teacher for 20 years. That's my thing. Started off as a singing teacher, got dragged into the classroom, then ran the recording studio, and then got head of year, which is when I started this work. It's a school in Hackney, and I just wanted my kids to be nice. So I got the sort of like group of year 7s, the new cohort, and I just wanted them to be nice people, because I was hearing racist, sexist, homophobic language, every day in the school, and it was horrific. So it was my way of trying to get them to understand about different types of people, because if you look at a curriculum in schools, you've probably experienced it all yourselves, that, you know, some of the time, all the time, we find that our curriculum is full of that we're just talking about white men in history, and that does happen more than not. And so it's really good to get your curriculum audited. Well, how often are we talking about different types of people? How often are we talking about like role models for women, for people with disabilities, and all these? And this is when it started to change for me. So as soon as we got this, which I'm sure you know what this Act is, so it's the 9 protected characteristics of what Act? What year did we get that?
2010.
Brilliant, you all get a bonus sticker. I shall be bringing these round at the end for your wonderful answers. And this is when really it started to get better. I was teaching still at this point, but this made a massive difference, and I set up the charity, and was using the Equality Act. So the policy is totally underpinned the work that we're doing. Because I'd go in and speak to head teachers before that, and they'd be like, oh no, why do I need to do this work? You can't get by on, it's the right thing to do, because they just weren't listening. So policy has really helped inform absolutely everything. And this is the policy stuff that really it comes through. Inclusion, that should be in every inclusion policy, in every organisation should have that. Now, equal ops is interesting, because I still go into schools. We make schools LGBT friendly, that's what we do. So it's me, we've got a team of trainers, and we go in and we train the teachers. Because it's all about getting the teachers confident. Because the kids are confident with this language, as you know, but it's the teachers. So we've got to get the teachers to match what the kids are thinking, so they're using this common language. And I'm sure you'll find as well, do you still find using the old gender, race, disability acts? And that, I find that a lot in schools, that's still happening. So it's getting rid of that and having a single duty Equality Act. So you are listing always the 9 protected characteristics. The new language in anti-bullying is HBT, so homophobic, biphobic, transphobic, so we get schools to update that. The biggest thing that has happened recently is uniforms.
Yeah, I know.
We've been doing this for like 11 years in mainstream, right? And there's been no issue with it whatsoever. But it made the Sunday Times last week, unbelievably, the front page of the Sunday Times is just clothes. How can clothes be so powerful? How can clothes really upset people so much? So what with the irony of the situation, front page of the Sunday Times, one of my schools got a gender neutral uniform, blah blah blah, all fine. Above it, there's a picture of the two, the prince and the princess. And the prince is dressed in blue. Yes. And the princess is dressed in pink. Right, spot on. And that is above our gender neutral uniform, front page of the Sunday Times. Ironic, totally ironic. Exactly what we're trying to smash. And there's heteronormativity right on show, right there on the front of the Sunday Times. Exactly what we're trying to smash, right? So we're trying to smash that by bringing in intersectionality, really. That's what we want the teachers to do. We want all our teachers to be teaching about different types of people, all of these strands, all the time. So not just in LGBT History Month or Black History Month and all that. We want it there all the time. We want to embed it every single day in the curriculum. That's what we do. We go in and audit the curriculum and we make that work. So the uniform thing's been amazing. And I was on the radio every day that week being called up, and I just cannot believe the anger that is out there about clothes. Well, you're confusing our children. You're taking away their innocence. What? We did our research in nursery schools. I finished my master's a couple of years ago, and I did all my research in nursery schools and primary schools. And what I found is, like, you know, the young kid, you say to like a group of nursery kids, can all the boys stand up? And they all stand up. Because they haven't learned to segregate by gender, and they just don't have our preconceptions that we have. They're not born racist, they're not born sexist or homophobic. These are all things that are put upon our kids that we spend every day in our schools trying to smash. This is outside influences all the time, and we just spend our time smashing it. SMSC, healthy relationships, that's one that I think is quite important, because that is your SRE policies. I'm sure those of you that know. It's called a sex and relationships education policy. Now, it's the very word sex that is the problem. That's the word that freaks out the parents and freaks out the governors, because they think we're teaching primary school children how to have gay sex. And this is like a thought that we are battling with all the time. So I get all my schools to change the language. So we call it a healthy relationship. So we call it a HRE policy. So it's a healthy relationships education. So we just eradicate that word sex, because that is not what we are doing in schools. Safeguarding, obviously, and I get all my schools to use this as a school code, because, you know, I've been an out lesbian teacher my whole career, and I want to know that I am safe going into any school, you know. So if they've got a school code at reception, something like that, is great. But I was told, we were chatting about Section 28, and I know you've been chatting about that this morning, but when I first started teaching, I was told not to come out. In my very first teaching post, I was just like, are you mad? I've never been in. Do you know what I mean? How can I be somebody else just because you're putting me in front of children that you want me to teach music to? It's absolutely outrageous that you're requesting for me to do that, you know. And you put that into any other context, you know. So if you're black, you know, It's like, can you just not be black in front of the children? All right, can you not wear your glasses and show your disability in front of the children? Because you're teaching them about, oh, eyesight, yes, and, you know what I mean? So it doesn't, none of it makes any sense when you put it into context. It's like the last bastion, really, for, you know, for sexual orientation and gender identity. There's still such a level of fear around those two things, even though our policy said 6 years ago, let's treat everyone equally and fairly. Beautiful language. So let's use that language, you know. It's great language and we should be using that in every school. So moving on, you can use history month, these are things to do. So changing those policies, we talked about that, just use the 9 protected characteristics, replace it all, get your gender neutral uniform policy. And you know, so many times you see that LGBT is put in, it has its own area in the SRE policy under sensitive issues, along with domestic abuse, HIV, all that, LGBT. I'm like, what? You know what I mean? How is that the same? How is that the same? None of the other protected characteristics are in there. Why are you using those? So really, all the time, it's trying to bring all those equality strands in line with each other. So none are getting more precedence over another. And really, that's our remit and what we try and do. But you know the words anyway, so I get my staff to shout the words out, so there's no issues around it, you know, because we've got to get over those fears. So, L is for what, everyone?
Lesbian.
That was the best response ever. G is for?
Gay.
B is for?
Bisexual.
And T is for?
Trans.
Just fantastic. And what might the plus be then? Because that's the new, we use that as our tagline now, LGBT plus. I like it. Q. Yeah, it's everything, yeah.
Q, I.
Yeah, and there's loads, and these are words that are in common use all the time now, you know, and we can use the word queer, you know, we've got the Queer Youth Network, that's been reclaimed, you know. I would call myself queer, lots of people call themselves queer, you know, it's just a shorthand way for belonging to the family of sexual orientation and gender identity. So teach the words to the kids, teach the words to the teachers. This is my mantra. Ooh, got a bit funny, a couple of words somewhere. Right, so this is what I really like to, I know you know these words, but this is my mantra that I get all the schools to copy. And jump on the rainbow bus with me and shout this out. So we're going to smash heteronormativity by introducing intersectionality, using this wonderful pedagogy of usualising. And usualising just means you're making LGBT people part of your everyday work. You know, you're not going to go and write new schemes of work, and there's no such thing as gay lessons, and there's no, you know what I mean? We're just saying it. You don't need funding for it. All you need is to say it. You don't need time. All these things that teachers think that are going to get in their way, they're simply not there. You know, I taught GCSE music, and I had to get this. I had to teach a disco unit. If I can't fit LGBT plus and different cultures in that, because that was the birth of the disco movement. It was the black community and the LGBT community coming together on the dance floor. There's an opportunity for me there to talk about that, talk about solidarity. I might show a bit from the film Pride, because that's solidarity, the LGSM, and coming together for the better good. And really, that's what we need to be teaching our kids in the classroom. So we do want to politicise them, and we do want to, because a lot of the time the kids aren't, and that's a real shame, because they're not getting that. That's okay, no worries. But it's our beautiful end result of the lands that I want to live in, and this is what I will keep up the fight for until we get there, which is our beautiful place of social justice. Brilliant. So that's the mantra. That's the mantra. That's where I want us all to be. But we've got to get there, and there's various ways in which we can do it. I've given you a postcard, and those are the 5 areas that we work in, which is policy, training, looking at the curriculum, getting your community involved and changing your environment. And I'm going to skip forward because I know I've only got 2 minutes, but these are all the things you can do. Look, you can quickly see all of those. Look at that. There you go. There's loads of things you can do. They're all there. We have showcases, bake-offs, you know, we have all sorts of things going on. But really, it's about you feeling confident in your everyday practice, to be using the words LGBT. You know, this is what some of the teachers have said. You know, and it is part of something bigger. It is. You know, we've really got to, I love that word, mobilise. And we've got to keep the pressure on with equalities, because you know you might have, you probably know the story, but this was like Ian Bainham in Trafalgar Square. These 2 young people, aged 17, 18, shouting homophobic abuse at him in Trafalgar Square. He shouted back, they went over, they punched him to the ground, and they kicked him to death. That was 6 years ago. Now, for the life of me, I have no idea where that level of hatred could come from our kids. So that says to me, right, as soon as we start this work, I do not want my kids growing up with that level of hate inside of them, because they are not born racist, sexist or homophobic. They are learnt. Those behaviours are learnt somewhere, and we have got to smash that. And these are my babies that all came out when I was head of year, all transitioned, very old photographs now, but they were all happy. So everything that I've talked about today is what we did in the school. So we just transformed the school, and this is what we do now with lots of other schools. We just had 80 schools pass our best practice programme for being LGBT plus inclusive, and it's great. And there's happy kids, and there's happy staff, and there's happy parents, because we're being inclusive of absolutely everybody. And this funny bell haircut boy, that's him. Now, this was at London Pride a few years ago. Grown man! And that's what he said. It just made it so much easier for him, you know, because he could be himself in school. He's gone to university, out in the workplace, and that's what we want for every single one of our kids. It was London Pride last Saturday as well. So I went, more kids that I knew from years ago coming up and saying, I'm bringing their boyfriends and their girlfriends to come and meet me on the stall. It was just absolutely fantastic, going, oh, I didn't know I was gay or lesbian or trans then when I was at school, but I know now, but you always made me feel that it was okay. And that's amazing. What an amazing thing that it's transformed their lives. So I just want to encourage you in your daily practice to be as inclusive, because I swear to you, a tiny little bit, just a tiny conversation with anybody at any point, you are saving and changing the lives of everybody around you. It's that powerful. I call them moments of change. Hashtag, and we collect them. So please tweet, hashtag moments of change. Any opinion that you change, I collect them for my research all the time. So please keep in touch and let me know how you get on. I guess I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you. So inspiring. And thanks for reminding us of we didn't need reminding about the environment that we're in. It's the context, the immediate context of the last as well. Next we have Razia Aziz, who is the co-founder of the Equality Academy, who work and study STEM in fields of counselling, coaching, voice and body work, performing arts and interfaith ministry.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellie. That was the perfect session for after lunch to make sure we did not fall asleep.
Good. I didn't make you sing, which is the first time I've not done that.
So I'd just like to invite, just for a moment, everybody to pause after that, because I felt very stirred up by what you did, and I realised that it's important to be reminded about what we're passionate about. And I'm just inviting everybody just to reconnect with why you're really here. It's because you're passionate about something. And if we just connect with that for a moment, this is something that really matters to you. It speaks to a core conviction, something maybe luminous, something that will one day be very hard won, that is possibly very, very precious and just out of our grasp. So in all our endeavours, we're reaching for something. And actually, that's the only reason we're all in this room together. We don't actually quite know what that will look like. I'm glad you've given really clear names to some of those things, and for some of us, the names are not so easy. So I'm just inviting everybody into that space of inquiry, because it speaks to the heart of who you are. And I think about the children in our schools. My son's 11, he's about to go to secondary school. This is absolutely pertinent to him. That every child is hungry to learn and to reach past the edges of what they know into the unknown, and to imagine and to create and to grasp and to seize and to play with and to master that unknown thing. It's the very essence of what education should be designed to feed and harness. And it's also at the heart of what I would call spirituality, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. This workshop asks, how can educators, policy practitioners, I'm quoting here, and feminists create a space for discussions of sexuality and fundamental religious practices, fundamentalist religious practices, to be out. So So it's about the discourse being out in the school environment and what kinds of practices and policies are best suited to ensure the well-being of children, particularly, and I'm saying LGBTQI++ children, and the values of secularism, liberty and human rights. Wow, what a question. What a question. That was only one of the questions. But in addressing this, I'd like to take issue with it, and in taking issue with it, I'd like to address it. And my issue concerns the question of spirituality and spiritual inquiry. Just a bit about myself. There's been lots of people in here who have done research, who are working in education day by day, who are academics and political activists. In a way, I don't sit in any of those stools. I have been a political activist, I have been an academic, but really I'm coming here with two sorts of hats. One is as somebody who's worked in organisations as a consultant for 20 years, doing equality and diversity, nose to the grindstone, but mainly as an one spirit interfaith minister who's concerned when we're talking about the well-being of children with their spiritual well-being and what that actually means. And that's where I take issues with two things. One is secularism, a principle that involves two basic propositions. First, a strict separation of the state from religious institutions, and the second, that people of different religions and beliefs are equal before the law. Now, I have no difficulty with either of these propositions, but they actually avoid the question of spiritual needs. And the second one is fundamentalism. It's like a form of religion that upholds belief in the strict literal interpretation of a scripture or a fundamental thought system. I'm not personally a fundamentalist, but I can perfectly respect people who are. The difficulty comes when there is a belief that is to be imposed upon other people, particularly their own children and other people's children. And that's a difficulty in the school environment. What I want to invite is a recognition that the well-being of children includes their right to a spiritual life which is capable of supporting them in their embodied and lived experience in the world. So the thing that Ruth was speaking about earlier, which is the teaching of religion as an abstract set of ideas or principles that doesn't bear any relationship to the lives that children are actually leading, is a very serious derogation of our responsibility to growing learners who are finding their way in the world and trying to get past that edge of the unknown to what I would call the mystery, the thing that we don't know yet, the thing we don't yet understand, to which there isn't one right answer, that every child should have the entitlement to pursue, to do business with that mystery in their own way and with the tools and the support and the information they need to do that. That's actually where I'm coming from here. So if I'm just to go forward with this question, what are my qualifications to do this? Well, I mean, I've grown up, personal qualifications. I've lived in this country for almost all of my life. I came here at the age of 6 from an Indian Muslim background. Remember the Iranian Revolution and the difference it made to people in my family's idea of their identity as Muslims. I started a PhD which was researching young South Asian Muslim women who had reverted to Islam in the early 1990s. So before a lot of what is now determining our world had actually happened, there was this nascent movement of young people, young women who were saying, actually, Islam is my main identity, and my parents don't understand. They brought me up with the wrong type of Islam. I'm looking for the true Islam. And that's more attractive identity than a feminist or a socialist or what we might think of as a progressive identity. Young girls who were wearing the hijab as a protest against their parents. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Well, that piece of work never got finished. I became an equality and diversity consultant. I've done a lot of other things. But along the way, I've had a civil partnership, I've had a son, and I've become an interfaith minister. And that journey of asking what's missing in our dialogue has taken me to this point of asking what is the child's entitlement to inquire into questions that I would consider to be spiritual questions. Whether the answers are recognisably spiritual or not, I have no issue about that. And those are questions like, who am I? What is my unique contribution? What is my destiny? Who are we? What is it to be human? What is the nature of our world? Where are we headed? And what is the mystery beyond what I know or what is known? And how shall I relate to it? So you can see that as I'm talking, I'm becoming animated because those are questions that really matter to me. And I believe that they mattered to me when I was a child. And I believe that children have a right to engage in that inquiry without undue hindrance and with lots of support from the adults around them. And if schools can provide that, schools become a privileged learning space for children to make that inquiry. And I'm going to give you 4 fictional examples here. So I've got 4 children. It's all based on real lives, but none of these are real people. So Hamida's 12 years old, she's Muslim, she wears a hijab, she's fallen in love with a girl in the 6th form, she believes her love is completely pure, she doesn't feel it's sinful, or that God will disapprove. But in what context will she be affirmed in that, other than in the imaginings of her own mind? Joshua presents as a boy, but he feels like a girl. He hasn't said anything to his family. She hasn't said anything to her family. She's worked out that since God is neither male or female, God must be kind of trans. And she feels kind of special. Who's she going to share that with? That inquiry. Ashley goes to church with his family. He stares at the white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Christ and wondering whether this could really be the picture of a Palestinian Jew. He fancies that Jesus is probably more his sort of colour, sort of maybe a golden brown. And he also wonders whether other things about the Jesus story may have been meddled with. Jesus never got married, maybe he was gay. Or maybe he was bi. Ashley thinks he's bi. Who's he sharing that with? Janet's parents are atheists. They're quite dismissive about religion. And Janet is perplexed by the Big Bang because she figures that there must have been something before the Big Bang which caused it. And if there are definite physical laws that rule the universe, who made them up? She's heard of intelligent design, but she daren't mention anything at home. She's quite comfortable with the fact that parents know she's a lesbian and very supportive of her. Darshan comes from a devout Hindu family, observes all the festivals, performs prayers and rituals. Their house has shrines in all the common rooms and in the bedrooms, statues of deities. He goes through the motions of practicing these rituals, but he's always thought them to be pointless because it seems to him that the material world factually is all that there is. And it holds enough mysteries of its own, that he's very interested in science, enough mysteries of its own not to have fantasies about non-material realms. He also knows he's gay, but he's determined to stay in the closet until he lives independently from his family. He's already made a decision about that, but he doesn't want to keep going to the temple. He doesn't want to do these rituals because he feels phony. Who does he talk to about that? So these 5 examples kind of drive me to the question, is what would a school environment that could support the spiritual well-being of these 5 children actually look like? Of course, all education doesn't happen in schools. And some of the education that happens in schools happens in the corridor and the playground and not in the classroom, and certainly not in the curriculum. So I'm kind of tossing these questions out to you to think, because when I work as a consultant, I'm just putting my consultant's hat back on, and we do case studies like this in organisations. What I'm trying to get people to do is to jump over their own shadow and think, what would need to happen in the institutional environment here for these children to find a safe learning space for their inquiry? What would it ask of teachers? What would it ask of parents? And what would it ask of the dialogue that would necessarily have to happen between the two? And that's a lot of where the thorny issues come. And of course, one of the things that's happened today is, I have the privilege of having heard so many wonderful presentations before, is this question of teacher training and how teachers can feel really confident, not to give answers, but to support the inquiry that young people are in. Because in these questions, there is no one right answer. There's an inquiring mind that's trying to work out who they are in the world. And the teacher is such a wonderful opportunity to support that person to forge their own way whether that's a religious or a non-religious way. For me as an interfaith minister, that is really very, very important, that people's spirituality is not determined by religion or by belief in God. It's determined by the quality of their inquiry into who they are. So then,
Just 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to share with you then only 5 questions, or 5 statements rather, 5 principles. And these are the ones that for me would shape an environment which would support the child in this inquiry. The first is that there are no stupid or taboo questions. There are no questions that cannot be asked in this environment. And you have to, as a teacher, you would really have to model that and ask some stupid ones yourself. So that's really clear, because otherwise, it doesn't come up. The second is, you are not alone. You may be unique, but there are others who share your characteristics, who exist in the world now, who, if you wanted to, you could connect with. This is ever so important, because when I was a child and I fell in love with the girl in the 6th form, that was very wonderful, but I didn't tell anybody about it, and I didn't know that other people did that. So that was an interesting thing. The third thing is that the history of your question goes back a long way, maybe for millennia, and other people like and unlike you have asked that question. So there is an inquiry. The fourth is test your inquiry against their answers. Does it make sense to you? And what doesn't make sense? And the 5th one is put your own beliefs, your faith, your opinions to the test in the fire of other people's questions of you. So it's really challenging young people. Yes, that's what you believe. Right, now here's somebody who believes something different who's going to ask you a probing question about that. See if what you believe in, what you're passionate about, whether there's a consistency in there, and help them forge their own way. So these 5 principles of work, this is where I've got to. I mean, there's more that I would love to say, and I'd like to talk about usualising and actualising, but it's been done by Schools Out already, and it's been done by your organisation already, so people can, we can do that in the question and answer.
Okay, thank you so much. It's clear that we need much more time for every single speaker, and there's so much going on, but I hope we'll get more in the questions. So let's move right on to Michael McCartan, Sexual Health Education Officer at the Rainbow Project in Northern Ireland.
Hello. So I think the main thing about what I'm kind of going to talk about is how completely separate Northern Ireland is from the rest of the UK. Almost everything that has been discussed and presented, may I just say, absolutely beautifully blown away, and I'm not going to do it justice, and I will come across as being very aggressive, but that's just our accent. We can't do anything about it. You have a beautiful child. See? So I do apologise for that.
It's just how sensitive English is.
Basically, Northern Ireland, as part of the UK, we enjoyed blowing each other up for a long time. We stopped doing that through a process which created the Good Friday Agreement. I don't know if you know much about this, I'm sure they used to. The Good Friday Agreement, the last time I had to study it, was 960 pages long. It is the most comprehensive power sharing agreement that basically has ever been produced by political science. The one thing that always gets me about this, and in the work that I do, I work for the Rainbow Project, it's the largest LGBT organisation in Northern Ireland. I also do clinical assistance for Brooke Advisory, so I have a bit of a mixture of both LGBT and non-LGBT. RSE, as we have discussed, is not included in the curriculum in Northern Ireland. They are not, it is the only, and it goes beyond that in the sense that, and I have a wee thing that I wrote out, anybody can access it, I'll put it in the PDF if anybody needs it. So, the education structures in Northern Ireland present significant barriers to the LGBT community. Schools are the only authority in Northern Ireland which are exempt from the statutory duty to promote equality and opportunity. exempt. They do not have to do any of the Section 75, any of the protected minorities. They don't have to do any of that. So we are unique and about 150 years behind everywhere else. So this is the environment that we work in. Everybody has brought something to the table that has resonated so much with me and I've picked up on. The relationship with the third sector. We are the third sector for LGBT rights in Northern Ireland. And we rage against, and it is extremism, as far as it is Christian extremism. And we rage against it on a daily basis. And it's very, very difficult. And we are the only, the LGBT community are the only community in Northern Ireland that bring both sides of the divide together in their abject hatred of us. So we will have fundamentalist evangelical Christians from the likes of the Democratic Unionist Party trying to put forward conscience clauses so that they can deny us rights and services. The cake slide that was put up earlier, I know the guy who ordered that. The bakery is around the corner from our offices. They have fabulous sausage rolls, right? Makes it all the more harder not to buy their stuff. But Tesco stocks their stuff. So this is how, you know, that has set a precedent that may change the law. So this is what we're dealing with. On the opposite end, we have the fundamentalist Catholics and their Catholic education system, which somebody mentioned before about working in a Catholic education. I am a product of a Catholic education system, but I thankfully have gotten better since because it's a form of abuse, what they do. My science teacher got pregnant outside of wedlock. She was sacked. Within the past 16 years, that has happened. So this is where we're coming from with this. It's incredibly complicated. The system that creates the Good Friday Agreement has set up a system called the HAUNT, which is completely unique to Northern Ireland. The HAUNT is power sharing. So the executive, the OFMDFM, the Office of the First and Deputy First Minister, has to be made up of the two largest parties. They happen to be diametrically opposed parties. Whoever has a majority within the Assembly can use what's called a petition of concern. The petition of concern is effectively a veto for any legislation brought onto the floor. So, Marriage Equality Bill, vetoed 5 times. RSE, vetoed 3 times. The RSE work that I do is community based, hence I'm here today because it's summer and I've got nothing, no groups on, except for summer schemes. But that is funded by the Public Health Agency, so it's external to education. There's nothing in education for this. And the problem with that is, as somebody asked the question earlier about what about faith-based schools, that may not be the correct terminology, but schools, academies, people. Every school in Northern Ireland is a faith-based school. We don't have secular education. And every single person comes out of their education with no knowledge. From my own personal experience, the textbooks that used to have the sex ed in them, the chapter was super glued together. Went from page 127 to page 139. Yeah. So that's, and the talk that the girls got around periods was given to them by a nun. So that's the level that you're dealing with. So not that I'm saying that she wasn't a very good educator, but if somebody had an external question around their bodies and sex, I can't imagine there would be much of a conversation. So that is basically where we are at in a Northern Irish context. So I don't really know. it's unique and interesting. So yeah, so where have we gotten to? Basically then that ties into invisibility. You're not recognised. Heteronormativity is the norm. You're not allowed. Section 28 basically still exists. There is no mention of LGBT. There is no facilitation of asking questions. The crux of this is that the schools themselves, the Minister for Education does not define the curriculum around this area, so the schools themselves then get to decide what happens. And every school has a Christian ethos. Every board of the school has reverends, ministers, priests on them. And so for that, so there's no monitoring of any type of bullying around LGBT. There's no transphobic, homophobic bullying. It's not monitored. So if it's not monitored, you don't know the extent to which it goes on. So then you can't create anything around it, and that's the problem. So with regard to creating our ability to allow people to come out in schools or allow them to even ask the question in schools, you first have to monitor it so that you can change it, and that just doesn't happen, unfortunately. So yeah, there. What else around? Yes. So the research into bullying, Ofsted recommended that people monitor bullying. It wasn't carried out in Northern Ireland schools. There's no clear direction from the department as to how individual schools are to teach issues around sexual orientation, leading to a patchwork of occasionally good but predominantly bad practices. This can be seen mostly in provision around relationships and sexual education, so we say RSE. The department permits individual schools to draft their own RSE policies without any oversight. This hands-off and unregulated approach to public policy has led to the type of policies which exist in a couple of integrated colleges, which I won't mention, but to quote unquote, staff should handle the issue of sexual orientation non-confrontationally, but they must continually and always promote heterosexuality as the ideal, regardless of their personal views or the views of the pupil. So, other quotes would state homosexuality is a sin. God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. So this is the dictation from the Board of Governors or from the hierarchy to the teachers. So the official culture that exists in the schools in Northern Ireland provide no means for anybody to even start a conversation. The playground culture comes from a very sectarian divide. So your religious identity is so strongly fixed to which side of the community you're on. There's no integrated education. There is, I know of one school that was basically started by the community themselves, and that is the only integrated school that I'm aware of, and I work regionally in Northern Ireland. So integration is not really an option, and there's no schools without this basic faith ethos. So because your religious background is so instigated into or part of your makeup and your community and where you live and who you associate with, that can be a barrier in itself to you which school you go to. So if you live in an area that is predominantly Catholic but has no access to Catholic education, you have to travel. So that kind of affects people's relationships, their ability to make relationships, formulate peer groups, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of differences that maybe aren't as applicable for yourselves. So it's a very unique situation, but it's an incredibly difficult situation, and it has taken the third sector to lobby on these points and to create these and to go via. And it's interesting, people were saying, relationships are never talked about. Everybody seems to focus on the biology of it, so on and so forth. It's quite interesting in Northern Ireland that our work is funded by the Public Health Agency. We've had to negotiate those contracts, negotiate those tenders on harm reduction of infections, so on and so forth. Yeah, teenage pregnancy, and that's how you get your relationships and all your LGBT stuff into the community. It's so back to front, it's not even funny. So I'm sure more will come out in, I'm not a very good public speaker, I'm sure more will come out in questions, but that's kind of it.
We needed to hear that, because otherwise we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know. So, brilliant, thank you.